It's Tuesday night, 8 o'clock, and this is the Bob Leonard Show. We'll be with you for about an hour, and like we tell you every week, we take the stories you've been reading about in the newspaper and watching on television, and we put our spin on it. We give you the story behind the story. And like we tell you every week, it's only our opinion. You can accept or reject it, but obviously we'll have our say. Tonight, before we jump into this week's story subjects, let's go back for a moment to the subject from last week's program. Since we did that story, in this case on the City of Burton mayor's election to be held on November 6th, between 16-year incumbent Mayor Charles Smiley and Lori Tennant, a matter has surfaced that need our attention, in my opinion. It seems there is kind of a concerted effort, a phony effort, by Smiley and his cronies to create a fictitious stampede to his candidacy. Their phony line is that everybody of importance is backing his candidacy. So if you want to continue consideration by Smiley, he says, and his administration after he's reelected, you better get on board now. Well, we haven't found any of that that support he's talking about, although he's saying these things that we've talked to people who have mentioned it to us. And when we inquired as to what organizations or politicians were endorsing him, as I said, we couldn't find any as yet, except maybe the land developers who have benefited financially from Smiley's favoritism as mayor of the city of Burton. You know, their large contributions to his campaign fund helped their causes when dealing with the city in the past with Smiley. These acts of favoritism by Smiley on behalf of these land developers and contractors were the essence of the federal government's investigation into Smiley and his friends, which has resulted in corruption charges being leveled against Smiley and his administration by the feds. You've heard all those statements. While we could find no real groundswell for Smiley and his candidacy, we did recall what some of the organizations have been saying about him. For example, the Flint Journal said some things about Smiley and the federal government's corruption charges against him and some of his administration. Here's what the Journal said right after his close friend and confidant was convicted of bribery and extortion while being a public works director for the city of Burton. And when you look at it, the evidence clearly implicated Smiley. Here's what it said, and incidentally, that investigation is still ongoing. No matter what Smiley and his friends want to tell you that it's over and he wasn't indicted, the evidence would indicate it's still ongoing. Here's what it says: corrupt climate, Burton Mayor Smiley allowed atmosphere for wrongdoing. This is a Journal editorial right after Abby was convicted. And it says this: even before Burton Mayor Charles Smiley's friend and aide was convicted last week of bribery and extortion, trial testimony and the mayor's own statements had shown this administration guilty of gross impropriety. Can there be any reasonable doubt that developer Blake Rizzo, who profited immensely from the business dealings with the city, should not have bought plane tickets to Florida and Las Vegas for Smiley and a Florida ticket for Public Works Director Charles Appy? And then there is the bizarre scene described in the federal court testimony. You might remember this. It says that Smiley waiting on a street corner to accept an envelope of cash from Rizzo's secretary. Rizzo had sent her out there to give this money to Smiley. He had said he needed it to bail a relative of his out up north. And if it was bail money to spring one of Mayor's relatives from jail, Rizzo's secretary never should have been able to give such damning evidence, because the mayor should have had the ethics and good sense not to solicit a financial favor from someone so dependent on the city's goodwill. And we've been saying that forever on this program. While the aforementioned creates an undeniable aura of corruption at the Burton City Hall, Abbey's conviction and possible prison sentence stems from another transgression: his acceptance of a subdivision lot from Rizzo for free or a greatly reduced price, allegedly for favorable city treatment for Rizzo. Smiley, at the very least, owes his constituents an apology for permitting a climate in which the public roles and personal gain became intertwined. He can begin this contrition by ending his absurd claim that he's done nothing wrong. You've heard him saying this all the time. That's absurd. He did a lot of things wrong, and we just mentioned it to him. He allowed this corruption to occur. Based on Abbey's conviction and other acknowledged entanglements involving Rizzo, Smiley administration is not the model to be followed. Now, that's pretty damning. Now, since this condemnation of Smiley appeared in this journal editorial I just read you, the Flint Journal has seen fit to endorse Lori Tennant, his opponent in the mayor's race in Burton. Here's what they had to say just 2 or 3 weeks ago. It says these things: Burton Mayor, it's time for a change, and Tennant should be it. This is the Journal editorial endorsing Tennant. It's permissible for a political leader to upset constituents for a community greater good. It's another thing to lose their trust. Unfortunately, Burton Mayor Charles Smiley is in the latter position, and many city residents who question his honesty. Because of a developer's corruption allegations, the conviction of a Smiley aide partly on the builder's testimony, and the mayor's poor judgment, Smiley is in an untenable position. Therefore, despite Smiley serving nearly 16 years as mayor, Burton should elect a successor this year. Voters will get this first opportunity to do it on August 7th primary, where the mayor faces 3 challengers, and Lori Tennant ran in that, and Smiley, both of them were nominated to run in the November 6th election for mayor. Tennant, 51, has learned much about city affairs in her 6 council years. The bookkeeper at the UAW Regional 1C also has been Smiley's most visible critic, an animosity that previously we felt harmful. However, 2 things force us to assess our opinion. The conviction of former Public Works Director Charles Abbey on federal bribery and extortion charges for accepting a subdivision lot from developer Blake Rizzo for free or greatly reduced price, and Tennant's more positive demeanor of late that we hope is permanent. The Rizzo matter suggests Tennant's long criticism of the relationship between Smiley's administration and the developer has credence. In other words, she's been complaining about this for a long time. The Journal, keep in mind, the Journal has endorsed this Smiley 3 times before this. Lori Tennant, while she was a citizen before she was elected to the city council, was very critical of this relationship between Rizzo and Smiley. And she was always kind of bad-mouthed for bringing it up. As it turned out, she was right. This past friendship between Rizzo and the mayor have tainted Smiley. On trips to Las Vegas, Miami, Rizzo puts Smiley's ticket on his credit card, charges the mayor says were reimbursed. Another time, he asked Rizzo for cash to help pay a woman's utility bill. But as it turned out, According to Rizzo's testimony under oath, it was to pay for a bond for a relative of his that was arrested up north. Such conduct only fuels speculation that Rizzo bought favors. Yet he acknowledges it's difficult to convince some people of his innocence, talking about Smiley. This is why Burton needs a new mayor, if only to change the script. Burton's betterment under Smiley is really in question here. It said it should be done, however, by electing a replacement with a good chance to succeed. Tenen, who ran for mayor 4 years ago, is well grounded on the issues and seems capable of leading in a time of lean revenues. We feel she's focusing now on large matters such as improving the economy rather than taking Smiley down. Therefore, to put a new face in the Burton mayor's office, Tenen is the best option. In fact, the only pragmatic one. So that's pretty strong, that they feel very strongly that Smiley is corrupt. His administration is corrupt. I'm sure that you can't read that any other way. It's time for a change out there, and hopefully the citizens of Burton will not be hoodwinked by last-minute flyers which, with no signature on it, which will make allegations which invariably are absolutely untrue. So watch for them, and when Smiley and his friends realize they may go down, they'll do anything to prevent Tenen from getting in that office, because Tenen, when she gets in that office, she'll find all kinds of things which Smiley was involved in that may be criminal. And they don't want her checking files. They don't want her doing any of this stuff. But that's what would happen if she was elected. And that'd be a good thing. Let's clean up the situation down there and start new. You know, there was, this past week something came up. You know, it seems the Flint Board of Education can emerge from the shadow of impropriety that has been cast by members of the board and administrators that they hire. You know, remember Superintendent Walter Milton, when he came here, he misrepresented his resume, what advanced degrees he had. He said he had a PhD. He didn't. He's working on it. Then he said he had a certain master's degree, which that was in question. Then he hired a pedophile. And then he had alleged misuse of the school district's credit cards. You remember that? And then when he leaves in a flurry for Springfield, his new job, and he leaves his property taxes unpaid. Now this is who this board hired. And that's the best they could do. Then you have the former Flint Board of Education top administrator hired by Milton and a friend and a business association of Milton. They hired Julius Anthony, who turns out to be a pedophile. Here's the story on him. Anthony convicted. Atlanta jury finds ex-school official guilty of child molestation. Now, my goodness, how would you ever hire a pedophile and a top administrator who dictates policy for the schools, who has access to about 15,000 young kids? How would you hire somebody like that without checking him out? He wasn't checked out. We said in this program he wasn't checked out, in our opinion, because Milton knew what his problem was, and he did not want a situation where Anthony would be fired or he would get in trouble for hiring him. I mean, this guy, they've been friends for 8-10 years. They've lived together. They were business associates. And Anthony was originally convicted of a misdemeanor. He allegedly pleaded guilty, and then that case was set aside. He was tried again and convicted of the felony this time. That was good thinking on the part of his lawyers and consultants. And then he lied on his resume about his degrees. He said he had 2 masters. He had 1. He said he had worked in the school programs as a principal in St. Louis. He never did. And that was part of the criteria that was required to get the job. He lied on those occasions. Now we have, and then we have the school board president, Stephanie Rob Martin, former school board president, gives up her cell phone. Here she is. She's former board of education president Stephanie Rob Martin. District issued cell phone is no longer in service. That's the phone in which she generated at a $3,055 tab in 6 billing periods this past year. And then she told the Journal she used the phone for school matters, business, and personal calls. In 6 billing cycles that ran from mid-September 2006 to mid-March, she logged more than 44,000 minutes. In one 30-day period, she used the phone an average of 5.5 hours a day. You know, how do you deal with it? Now, here we come with the most recent one. The Raymond Hatter, the vice president of Flint School Board and director of a tax-supported housing agency, he was arrested and jailed about 10 days ago for various traffic offenses, including driving with a suspended license. Now, you remember this article. Flint School Board official arrested. It says this: the vice president of the Flint Board of Education, who is a leader of the local nonprofit housing agency, was temporarily jailed Tuesday after he was arrested in Flint because of an outstanding warrant for driving with a suspended license. Raymond Hatter was released from Flint City Jail sometime Tuesday. Can you play that tape, please?
Driving with a suspended license, and according to police, he was initially stopped for having an improper plate. He was held in the county jail for part of yesterday. No word on any further charges.
But now repairs are completed?
Well, anyway, that was Channel, I think, 12's report on it. He was arrested and jailed after police found he had a misdemeanor warrant for driving on a suspended license last year. He was issued 2 tickets, an appearance ticket for driving with a suspended license and a ticket for having an improper plate. He also was given warnings for not having proof of insurance. I'll bet he doesn't have any insurance. I don't have any evidence of that, but I'll bet he doesn't. This record would indicate his attitude about following the rules and obeying the laws. Now, here's the thing that really is disturbing. It says Secretary of State records show that Hatter does not have a current driver's license because of several suspensions. He has 5 suspensions because of unpaid tickets or failing to appear in court, and 4 suspensions for failing to pay driver's responsibility fees. Now, Kendall Williams, who is the board attorney and who is hired by Hatter and his friends on the board, he says Tuesday he doesn't believe such civil infractions would preclude Hatter from serving as an elected official. I think that's right. I think he's right on that. And then it says Hatter is executive director of the Salem Housing Community Development Corporation, a Flint-based nonprofit housing group. Hatter is a former reader representative on the Flint Journal's editorial board and is a member of the City of Flint's zoning board. So now you have this guy come in here. Now, keep in mind, he was the reader representative. That means supposedly the public on the editorial board. There are 5 people on the editorial board. One is a reader's representative. So he's friendly with these people. And here's what they say. conduct unbecoming. This is an editorial they wrote after his arrest. Any suggestion that Flint School Board member Raymond Hatter's arrest stemming from driving offenses might have nothing to do with his public duties avoids the big picture. Hatter's image, which reflects every facet of his life, must be suitable for someone placed in a position of trust by the voters. Driving without a license with improper plates on his car and a record of tickets and other infractions he ignored sets a poor example for this city and its children. We do not relish admonishing Hatter for his inexcusable conduct, and we enjoyed his company and contributions when he served as a volunteer reader representative at the Flint Journal editorial board. And then they go on to say, among other things, but those good deeds don't excuse a driver's record that shows blatant disregard for the laws. All must obey. Blatant disregard. Hatter needs to apologize for these transgressions and clean up every pending matter to the satisfaction of authorities. Then he must vow forever more to live up to the standards required of someone in his position or surrender such status altogether. So they're saying, the guy ought to apologize at least, and he should clean up his tickets. Then we have another one that came after that, and it says, Hatter mum about arrest over traffic tickets. He didn't take their advice. He just laying dead. It says here, Raymond Hatter wasn't talking. He says, I have no comment, Hatter said one day when reached by telephone at his Salem Housing Community Development Corporation in Flint. Hatter is the executive director. And as I say, Secretary of Records show that Hatter does not have a current driver's license. So you wonder if how he's getting around, but somebody's going to watch it. So anyway, there we have all these situations developing. And when you look at it, based on Hatter's driving record, this arrest was not for an isolated shortcoming on his part. The Secretary of State says he has 5 license suspensions, maybe as many as 9, for non-payment of his traffic tickets. These many violations clearly demonstrate their arrest, as I said, was not an isolated lack of memory, like, oh, I didn't know that my license was revoked. He had, at least, according to the Journal, 5 and maybe as many as 9 notices from the Secretary of State, and he just ignored them all. What it really does show is a clear disregard for the law. What message does that send to our kids, as the Journal suggests, when the Vice President of the School Board thinks he's above the law? If he doesn't take care of these tickets and refrain from driving his car and get his license back if he can, he may not be able to, but at least pay the tickets. Don't drive the car if you don't have your license. And he doesn't do these things, and he should apologize. When I got in trouble, I apologized. If he doesn't do these things, he should be sacked. We'll see what the board. See, the board, it's kind of a club. They take care of each other. They'll hope they'll ignore this. I'd be surprised if Hatter apologized, because it'll keep it going, and in his mind, although he might realize that that's the thing to do, pay off the tickets and go back to the board and try to do what he was elected to do. Well, we'll see. We'll be watching it anyway. Anyway, there was a nice article in the Journal this week, in Sunday's paper. I just want to allude to, written by Paul Janswiski. It's on Frank and Michael Manley are attorneys from different styles but similar success. It says Manley's drive, skill, and results in court. get results in courts. But anyway, now I should mention to you, I've known these young men since they were youngsters. Frank and my son went to school together, ran around together when they attended Longfellow Junior High and Northern High School. They played hockey together for years on the same team. And his father, Frank, is a friend of mine. So I followed these young men and watched them grow up and develop. They've always been a credit to the Manly name. And you know, the Manly name is important here in Flint. Frank Manly, their grandfather, and C.S. Mott created the community school program. And you know, the program has been copied all over the world. The irony here is that the program has fallen on bad times here in Flint, Michigan, and it's been cut way back. We hardly have any program now. There might be a few schools that have community school directors, but it was a tremendous program. As I say, they came from not all over the United States, all over the world to learn how to put this program in effect, because it was extremely effective and would be today if we had the money to do it, apparently. At one time, the Mott Foundation, when C.S. Mott was alive and Frank Manly were working together, put millions of dollars into this program. They had programs at every single grade school, junior high school, and senior high school in the entire city when our population was like 190,000 people back in the 60s, and actually in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I mean, we had programs in every school, and they went on till 9, 10 o'clock at night. The neighborhoods were active with people walking around, going to classes from their neighborhoods in the neighborhood school. Whatever classes they wanted to take, dancing, French lessons, geometry, you know, whatever. It was in these schools. Now, some of the classes you may want to take were at another school, but you could go to that school. It didn't cost anything. That's who Frank Manly's and Mike Manly's grandfather was. They were very, very important people to this community. And these young men are becoming very important to this community. But you know, the essence of law, when you're trying to decide and why you are successful in cases, besides their personality and their ability, and they're very good before a jury, they do a lot of investigation beforehand, and they do this so they can make a case evaluation. That's the key in trying a case. The Manly brothers are two of the best. They look at a case, they analyze the facts. And there's many considerations when you're looking at the facts. First, do you really believe this guy or gal that they're innocent? That's an important consideration. Even if you don't believe they're innocent, you still have an obligation to represent them as best you can within the rules of the legal profession and the laws of the state of Michigan and the federal government. Now, by that I mean you can't participate in any fraud on the court. The fellow goes up and says, look, even though I told you I did this, I'm going up and say someone else did it, and I was there and saw him do it. You'd have to say, hey, man, I'm not getting involved in that. I will represent you, but don't you testify that way. Your best approach would be don't testify, because I'm not participating in a fraud on the court and the people and the jury. And they do that. They're not going to get involved in anything like that. That's why they have the reputation they do. They're tough, hard-nosed lawyers, but they got a good reputation. People trust them. If they tell you something, you can count on it. So, when you look at a case, you look at the facts. And if you really kind of believe the guy's innocent, that makes it easier to try. If if you don't believe he's innocent, then it's up to you to make sure the government proves their case with legal evidence. For example, you're looking at the facts, and your witness comes in and says, you know, I didn't mean that. I didn't know that was going to happen. I didn't know that I would be charged with second-degree murder if I was driving and I was drunk or something, or I had been drinking. Maybe he wasn't drunk. That's a matter of fact that they can look into. And determining the intent on second-degree murder, the intent is pretty substantial. And then the fellow says, well, I didn't break into that house. I didn't commit a robbery there because I was with somebody else. So he may have an alibi. And then he may have a self-defense if it's a murder case. He may have a legal defense of self-defense. And then the burden, of course, is as a defense attorney, you know, you say, okay, I'm going to defend you, but I'm not going to participate in any kind of a fraud. What I will do is make the government prove you're guilty with legal evidence. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what a lawyer is supposed to do. The government has a responsibility not to come in with any forced or coerced confessions or illegal searches and seizures. If these things are thrown out, like in the Miranda warnings, you have to give warnings. People say, why do they do that? Why do they tell people they have a right to an attorney and they don't have to talk to the police if they don't want to, and on and on? That's not to help a guilty person. It's to make sure that innocent people, even in some cases guilty people, are not confessions are not forced from them or coerced from them. Because often in the olden days, those things were happening before the Miranda. I mean, the police on many occasions, not every police officer, but many of them, would beat guys into confession, would coerce them into confession, would trick them, or would lie about what the defendant said. So the Miranda was to protect people from that kind of activity. So they say, okay, here's your rights. Well, you say, okay, I want to call an attorney and talk to him. Nothing wrong with that. It's not intended to protect the guilty. They may ultimately benefit by it, but it's to protect the innocent people. So all of these, all of these things are important, and that's what the Manleys do so well. They evaluate a case. They know where the strong points are in that case and the weak points, and they go out and they interview witnesses. They have investigators that go out and do this. Very few attorneys in the criminal area. You know, that's not a very lucrative area because many of these people who come into an office don't have any money and are poor people who committed crazy crimes, and they can't afford attorneys. So they're appointed. And there's a lot of good attorneys that are appointed, but they don't have the resources, usually. Now there is exception, but usually that an attorney like the Manleys have when a person comes in and can afford to hire them. Now they do a lot of work free of charge if they feel that the person may be getting railroaded, and I use that word advisedly, where he has legal defenses and the prosecution, the police aren't looking at it or gave it short shaft. So they will look at that, and they have the resources to do these things. Now it costs the defendant. You know, the cost of this thing is passed on to your fee that you pay for the Manleys. But listen, if I'm in trouble, I want them representing me because they're very good. Now that doesn't mean there aren't other good defense attorneys. Like I say, appointed attorneys usually don't have the resources, but in some cases, like in serious murder cases or something, they can go to the courts, and the courts may give them money to hire an investigator to help them prepare their defense in a murder case or in a serious crime. And that happens quite regularly. So you have to understand, lawyers who pass the bar generally are qualified to handle cases. But what's happened today, and you see, as we say here in this case, the Manleys are being recognized as criminal defense attorneys. And that's what's happened to the legal profession today. More and more specialization is occurring. The laws are so convoluted in some cases, and so many of them coming down from the courts of appeals, from the district court, or from the Supreme Courts, from all over the place. And you have to continue to read the cases to make sure you stay up on what the rulings are in those cases and how it might affect your client. But, you know, you've got the criminal law, you've got employee rights laws, you've got real estate law, you've got medical malpractice law, you've got workman's comp law, all specialties. All specialties. Now you have the private practitioner that generally can handle most cases that come to him. But if it's a particular case that requires a specialty lawyer, he will then contact that specialty lawyer. Generally speaking, he will, and bring him in, and he will specialize. He will handle the case and probably work in conjunction with the general practitioner who is a friend of yours or went to school with or whatever it is, so that's why you went to him. But if the lawyer does not have the background in this specialization area, generally they will bring in a specialist. So lawyers know enough to do that if they need some help on a particular case, like in a medical malpractice. Invariably, most lawyers, practitioners generally, or specialists in other areas, don't have the know-how in that area, so they bring in a medical malpractice lawyer whose only practice is in the medical malpractice area. So he knows all the rules and the regulations, and he knows what to look for. So the Manleys, even though they show here that they're good in court and they're very effective, also handle other cases. Now, their specialty may be criminal law, and they've been very effective in dealing with these cases, and they do a good job. But if I'm in trouble, I'm going to the Manleys. That's all I can say to you. That's what I think of them. And they're really well-organized lawyers, and they know what they're doing. And so you always get your money's worth. You know, as I say, evaluation is important. And the evaluation may mean that you don't go to court. The evaluation may mean, and I'm sure the Manleys will tell you this, evaluation, that's why I say it's the most important thing. You look at it and say, they got all the evidence. We got to make the best deal we can. We got to look at seeing if we can get some kind of a plea bargain here. So maybe to keep you out of prison and you just be put on probation, or if you have to go to prison a shorter time. So what they're looking for is some kind of fairness and justice in how the prosecution will deal with your case. And your lawyers, the defense lawyers, maybe they don't want to try it because, you can't win it. And if you can't win it and you lose, the judges may give you more time, although they're not supposed to, and I'm not sure that they do that anymore. But in the old days, they used to do that. If you're trying a case that you should have pleaded out and took more of their time, they would respond sometimes in that fashion. But these guys know the law in that particular area, but they also know, as I say, the law in other areas. And as I say, lawyers generally, if they pass the bar, they're capable of doing most of the work you would come in to see them about. You want a will, they have estate lawyers, but most lawyers, if the estate is not complicated, can write a will or can drop a will for you. If it is complicated and has all kinds of trusts or something they don't feel comfortable, they're calling in a state lawyer to help them with it, because it may have tax implications, all kinds of things. But anyway, that's what this story's about. And as I say, the key to it, and these guys will tell you, what makes them so good is not just being in the courtroom and trying a case, but evaluating the case to see where you go with it. Do you look for a plea deal? Do you have a defense? Is your defendant someone who the jury would have some feeling for? You know, all these different things are important in making a determination. Those guys are two of the best evaluators in this whole area, and that's what this was really about. Now, I want to talk to you. You know, here's the latest terrible chapter in the Career Alliance fiasco. In the Journal, there was an article the other day. Genesee County Sheriff's Department investigators descended on Career Alliance Incorporated on Friday, loading a trailer with seized documents from the job training agency. They had files, they had computers, they had everything. They drove up in a truck with a big trailer behind, and they loaded that stuff up. The unfortunate part about this, the sheriff was forced to execute the search warrant on this government agency who is being investigated for criminal corruption. You know, they've been talking about laundering money, kickbacks, obtaining money under false pretenses, you know, all kinds of activity that they're looking at. But here we come in. This is a government agency. Paquel said he had no choice but to obtain search warrants to carry out the seizure because officials for the nonprofit agency would not turn over the records earlier this week. This agency receives about $21 million a year, probably 17, 18 million or more, from you taxpayers. They may have been doing some criminal things, and your sheriff, who you elect to investigate these things, can't even get the records without a search warrant. He says this: "Normally I would not comment, but I'm forced to do this because Career Alliance attorney told us he would not make the records available to us," Paquel said. "I understand he's trying to protect his client, but in the process he's forced us to do something I didn't want to do." Makes sense. He makes these people look like, he said, this is Paquel, it makes these people look like they're trying to hide something. No kidding. That's exactly what it makes it look like. Remember, then it says, listen to this. This is really funny. Members of the Workforce Development Board, that's the board of directors of the Career Alliance, said they have been working since placing Loving on leave. Pam Loving was the director. She was placed on leave. To restore credibility to the agency, have resolved some outstanding issues with regulators, and have improved the oversight policies of the practice. The funny part here, it's almost a joke. It says, members of her said they have been working since placing Loving on leave to restore the credibility of the agency. Now, do you think that their attorney, who refused to give the records to the sheriff, who was conducting a criminal investigation into wrongdoing into that public agency that we pay our taxes for, made that decision without checking with this board? What are they trying to hide? Listen to this. One board member, Ivan Love of Shiawassee County, said the agency's mode of operation has to change so that board members start receiving monitoring letters and other documents that tell them directly of any early problems. You know, the word up there is that the administrators of that program were giving the agency some phony letters that they were doing great when they were receiving letters from the state saying, hey, you're in trouble. They weren't showing them those letters. That's what this Ivan Love is saying. They weren't showing those letters. They kept them from them, and this is the board that runs this thing. You've got to show them these things. Because they got to make corrections, but they didn't want corrections because it was like their own, these directors and these administrators, it was like their own candy store. Ed Donovan, another board member, said the group was duped. We can feign indignation, he said, but ultimately we're responsible. I said this board got duped. We need to not allow that to happen again. No kidding. Now, here's what started the real portion of this investigation. Daley sent a letter to the sheriff asking that to investigate possible crimes at the agency. Bailey's letter suggests Career Alliance used a non-competitive process to purchase a telephone system valued at more than $117,000 last year. That was par for the course for them, and the law requires that there be competitive bidding, but they were ignoring it. Listen to this. A consultant was obtained, according to the letter by Bailey. A consultant was obtained to evaluate the existing Career Alliance telephone system, which is the $117,000, to determine the telephone system the agency may have needed, whether they needed it or not. A new system was recommended from the consultant company, the consultant. Now, this letter by Bailey suggests an executive for one company that benefited from the purchase may be related to Career Alliance administrator. No kidding. No kidding. We told you who that was. Pan Loving's son was a consultant. She never mentioned that to anybody. And there was, you talk to the people up there who work in the Career Alliance, they said the other phone system worked fine. They didn't need a new phone system. And this is what they're investigating, because this is, this could very well be a conspiracy to cheat and defraud the public, and that's what they're looking at. Now, why wouldn't they show them the records? Come on. This is a public agency. Why would the sheriff, who investigating some wrongdoing in that agency, be forced to get a search warrant rather than being allowed to go in there and look for what he wants to find or he wants to look at to find whatever's there? Why would they prevent him from doing that? Like Piquel said, it does make them look bad. Looks like they're hiding something. I say they are. Otherwise, why not give all the records? But there sits that board saying, hey, we're doing all these things to correct these problems. Here's what they say: to restore credibility to the agency. You think that really restores credibility when you force the sheriff to get a search warrant on a public agency looking for wrongdoing in that public agency? Why? What are they hiding? What are they hiding? Now keep in mind, there was a lot of conflicts of interest here from this board who was involved in contracts that Career Alliance gave to agencies they work for, and they're now board members getting this money from Career Alliance for their agency. Maybe they didn't want to show that. Maybe they didn't want to tell how much they got. You wonder what's happening, what was happening to those records. There's a lot of talk about records disappearing or whatever, and apparently they didn't get their records sufficiently shredded or hidden, and that's why that's the impression people have. What are they trying to hide? Well, we'll see what happens here. Incidentally, we had quite an important event that happened here. It was a significant event. Probably the most significant event that I recall, where people of both races came together since the 1967 sit-in at City Hall in support of the open housing ordinance. And then the 5,000 people that showed up on Sunday to hear the people speak on that ordinance. both black and white people appeared there. And this is, first time we've had an occasion to do this in a long time because of the graffiti people were painting out there in Flushing. Anti-sexist, anti-black graffiti. And it was a serious matter because they eliminated out there, the park officials and the county park would paint it over and they'd come back to do it again. So this rally was called to show that the community, the whole community, not just the black community or the women or whatever, the whole community, this is unacceptable in this day and age. And so you have to commend those people that came on their Sunday, beautiful Sunday day, to express and manifest their outrage at what was happening and what they wanted done about it. I want to show you some of the tapes that we did up there. Can you play that, please?
Racist and sexist remarks in a Flushing County park earlier this month. While crews have cleaned up that mess, local pastors feel a stand needs to be taken to wipe out that kind of attitude in Flushing and other parts of Mid-Michigan.
The same thing happened in Flushing, happened in Flint, it's happening in Grand Blanc, it's happening in Fayetteville, Davison, in all of these neighborhoods. It's time to let it go. It's time to let hate go.
Hundreds are expected at the rally on Sunday. The group will circle the park and then pray.
More than 500 people joined area pastors for a march in Flushing today. A prayer march was held at Flushing County Park where vandals spray-painted racist and sexist graffiti 2 weeks ago. KKK and other racist slurs were painted throughout the Riverwalk leading up to the park and throughout the park itself. One pastor says it's an issue of moral justice and is unacceptable.
Come together as sisters.
We have come to understand that God often takes something that is meant for evil and puts a twist to it, a gospel twist, and some good comes out of it. This is a good thing as people come together to pray and to unite in fellowship in a common mission. The event was sponsored by the Flushing area pastors along with Concerned Pastors for Social Change of Flint.
I called together the brethren out here in Flushing because I thought we could speak on the same page about what happened. We are not pleased with what happened because what happened affects all of us in this day and time. We are not for that. Whether you're black or white, we're just not for that. This is right.
Does this feel like a step backwards?
It is a step back for 2007. We ought to be thinking about the floods, thinking about the guys trapped in the mines in Utah, those over in China, rather than being out here today talking about what took place a few weeks ago.
Okay. Have you had hate incidents at your church in Flint, or have you known about them in Flint?
Never. Not incident in our church or anything, no.
And none of your
Originally have not experienced anything and said anything. You know, we're just touched by what took place out here, and we're just speaking out against it because we don't want to spread over into other areas if we can stop it here. And those who might have done this, we ask that we just stop this for 2007. And let's not have problems. Let's just be brothers and sisters and live together.
Okay, thank you.
And I think this is what God would have us to do, is to get to know each other. We have our secretary hours on Sunday morning, and then on Sunday evening, together as children of God. And I think God can God be great. Today for come together, brethren and sisters, for this event, and I thank God for allowing us come together and forget about God gave us rain on Friday, sunshine on Sunday. And after all, when I got this morning, I said, this is the day that the Lord has made. I'm going to rejoice and be glad therein. I don't care whether anybody else rejoices or not, but what the Lord has done for me, I can preach right now.
Well, I think it showed that there was a large group of people, over 500, the journal says, and I think that's probably correct, of both black and white people. And like Reverend Randolph, who was one of the leaders of this, he's president of Concerned Pastors and a very fine guy, very reasonable guy to deal with, and he isn't a rabble-rouser of any kind like some people want to attribute to a black person who stands up for their rights. He's just a very nice man, and he's strong. I mean, if he's right, he's going to tell you he feels very strongly about his position. But you have to commend the churches and their members who really were behind this rally, that they all came out on this Sunday afternoon to show their support for their dislike of racism and sexism. So, I think it was just a great show of interest and strength of this community. And I think there'll be other occasions when the people get together like this, and I hope they do it more often, because this was a very homogeneous group there that day. Everybody was getting along. They knew, shaking hands, meeting each other. It was very rewarding, in my opinion. So anyway, I wanted to tell you about and talk to you, and I'll have to do it next week, this issue of not being able to see the Big Ten football games that we usually see, because they now have a Big Ten network that prohibits the showing of games unless they are top-tier games like Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Penn State, those kinds of things. They want, those are games you will see on the regular ABC, CBS, NBC. But if you want to see other games that won't be on the national television stations, you have to go to this new network created by the Big Ten network. And they do that because they want to make money. And there's a lot of money to be made. And they criticize Comcast, and Comcast deserves a lot of criticism for this, probably, and other things. But the Big Ten is somewhat involved in this and is entitled to a little criticism on this point. But I want to talk to you about this next week so you better understand what's happening. And hopefully I can make it clear. It's kind of complicated when you're reading the paper. Most people don't understand it yet. But I hope that we can discuss it next week so that you will better understand it and see what's behind this, see what's behind Comcast's position and the Big Ten's position. So, till next week, we'll see you at the White Horse, and God willing, we'll be back next week.